So President Donald Trump's relentless effort to get people to stop talking about Jeffrey Epstein, it's still falling short. In a surprising development, Trump's own Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, made some bombshell comments this week about the convicted sex criminal, who at one point was his neighbor. Take a listen.
I say to him, massage table in the middle of your house? How often you have a massage? And he says, every day. And then he gets weirdly close to me.
Ooh.
And he says, and the right kind of massage. That's what his MO was, get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume was on video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever. Blackmailed people. That's how he had money.
Oh, man.
Unsettling.
Oh, man.
Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas. She's still here with us. Congresswoman, what are the next steps after you hear all of these details? Are lawmakers going to get Lutnick right in front of them?
Absolutely, I hope so. And frankly, I wouldn't even want to bring him before the full committee. We get 5 minutes, and typically people take those 5 minutes to kind of put on their show. I actually would want a transcribed interview or a deposition, which we have done a number of those. Recently, we did a transcribed interview of Alex Acosta, and we would really need to dig in. I mean, this is someone who basically says that he knew that he was a pedo or something strange was going on, and he lived next door to him. And so it would be very good to get information out of him, find out what types of documents, if any, he has, meaning if he had any camera footage and that kind of stuff, and if it is archived somewhere so that we can see who was coming and going and hopefully be able to do the investigation that seemingly the Department of Justice either did not do or they've just refused to turn over the rest of the files, because I will remind the American people that a subcommittee on oversight did send lawful subpoenas over, and the Department of Justice, well, they basically have shut down and have stopped giving us stuff. And when Kash Patel came before our committee, Judiciary Committee, he basically was kind of tiptoeing around it and saying, well, we're only going to give you those things that we can lawfully give you. And it's well, you got a lawful subpoena, honey. So if there is a question about whether or not something should be divulged, then maybe we should go to court. But not you determining what we shouldn't get. That's not how subpoenas work.
Congresswoman, the Wall Street Journal had an investigation that showed how many premier banks and institutions in the United States were willing to do business with Jeffrey Epstein right until the moment he died. What are we going to be able to find out? When are we going to be able to find out more about Jeffrey Epstein's financial dealings and who was ensnared? I know that Senator Ron Wyden has really been pursuing this, but what does oversight have going here?
Yeah, so we have not sent separate subpoenas out to financial institutions. Something that we discussed with some of our members that are on oversight as well as financial services was actually widening the scope of this to the extent that we would then have financial services be the ones to send out subpoenas to Treasury, and kind of starting there. And so the idea is follow the money. As we had a closed door meeting with a number of Epstein survivors, that was one of the things that they told us is hey, follow the money. And it is my understanding that if we were to really start to dig there, we would discover that we're not talking about some ring that was going on just here within the United States, but we're talking about millions of dollars, and we're talking about internationally kind of being traded, and we're talking about trafficking women internationally. If you've watched some of the survivors, you notice that some had accents. Many of these women went into different modeling agencies, and they weren't modeling agencies, they were fronts. So there is a lot to kind of unravel, not to mention it was made clear that he was consistently setting up kind of these sham businesses, and he was just running girls through them. that was one of the accounts that we heard, was basically when he did get incarcerated, and I use air quotes for a reason, and he was on work release, he had set up a fake business so that he could go to that fake business on work release, and he was abusing girls there. So there's still just so much that we really need to dig into, and I don't think that there was ever a thorough investigation. And if there was, they absolutely are refusing to give us the information that they have.
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
And varied reaction today to budget head Russell Vought saying the firing of federal workers could come any time as the government shutdown drags on. Speaker Mike Johnson insists Vought is doing this only out of necessity.
Russ does this reluctantly. We had a 45-minute telephone conference with him yesterday. He talked to all the House Republicans. He takes no pleasure in this because Russ has to sit down and decide, because he's in charge of that office, which policies, personnel, and which programs are essential and which are not. That is not a fun task, and he is not enjoying that responsibility.
But Republican Senator Mike Lee said Vought, quote, has been dreaming about and meticulously preparing for the Schumer shutdown since puberty. He adds this is going to empower Trump. Megan and Ashley are back with me. So, Megan, you first. Are you buying the argument that Russ Vought is doing this reluctantly? Or is it more like what Senator Lee said, that he's been planning for this as an architect of Project 2025? Because forcing people to lose their jobs via permanent firings, it is entirely optional. Employees are furloughed during government shutdowns, but they get back pay when the government opens up.
So how Mike Johnson can get up there and just lie is shocking to me. Russ Vought does not need to be picking out who's essential and who's non-essential in terms of a permanent firing. That's what you do to decide who is an essential worker who has to come to work without pay and who is furloughed. So I just don't buy that they are not doing this. Also, they've been talking about Project 2025 for a very long time. No one is fooled by that. The Democrats tried to warn them in the election last cycle, and it did not work. The American people did not believe it. But now that they are seeing them in action and seeing their lack of humanity and their lack of dignity, when they talk about people's jobs and paychecks, they will believe them going into the 26th cycle, and that will only help Democrats. It is just unfortunate that we are that the Republicans are being so callous with people's lives and their paychecks.
And remember, it was a Republican, Senator Mike Lee, who said that he was gleeful about this, been planning this for years and years. So, Ashley, are Republicans being too open about this shutdown helping them achieve their goals? Or can they be as open as they want since they hold the power of Congress and the White House? I mean, Trump famously claimed he didn't know anything about Project 2025 during the campaign. Seems that that's changed.
Well, that's what's fascinating about this. He distanced himself completely from Project 2025 on the campaign trail because it was widely unpopular with voters. So it'll be fascinating now that they've hitched their wagon to this. And we've seen since day one of this administration, which, by the way, we're only about 9 months in, and about 48% of Project 2025 has been adopted by this administration. So he's installed people of power who authored 2025 into his administration, into positions of authority. And what we're seeing is exactly how this playbook was designed to go. It's more of a consolidation and expansion of the executive branch power. And as a result, the government now is serving one man's ego. And that's exactly what's happening here. So it would be very hard, I think, for Trump to be able to distance himself from Project 2025 in the midterms, and for any Republican running for the presidential seat in 28. But I don't know how they could distance themselves again after saying that they didn't know anything about it, but now it's all being adopted and coming together the way it is.
So, my director, Josh, let's put that graphic back up, because as Ashley's just mentioned to you, Megan, an online tracker calculates this number: 48% of Project 2025's initiatives have been implemented. That includes things like Medicaid work requirements, deploying troops to the border, stifling student loan forgiveness, abolishing DEI initiatives, cutting funding for NPR and PBS public broadcasting, and so much more. Are you surprised how quickly this has happened?
I'm a little surprised at how quickly it's happening. What's even more surprising is that there seems to be no Republican that is fighting back and pushing back on any of these initiatives. I understand having policy arguments and implementation arguments around the margins of how we're spending money in Congress, but Congress is completely just totally given all the power back to the White House and to Donald Trump. To rebuild our government and our democracy after Donald Trump leaves office is going to take 10, 20 years to get back to where we were when we started. I mean, it is shocking to me that Republicans are not pushing back more against Donald Trump. It is disgusting. I am shocked that they are just letting him do this.
Trump's handling of the Epstein scandal and the fallout around it shows fear driving every one of his moves. Every time Epstein's name comes up, Trump seems to just shrink back with these excuses. Oh, I don't know about it. Oh, they're doing that still? Oh, come on already. He's spent years trying to minimize attention to it, but the truth keeps slipping out. Take Howard Lutnick now, his former neighbor and Commerce Secretary. Lutnick's recent comments are jaw-dropping, describing Epstein's blackmail operations, his massages, and the likelihood of surveillance right in his own house for his guests. These details tie directly to Trump's inner circle, and they can't be erased. The proximity alone is enough to make anyone uneasy, and it needs an investigation. We need to see those Epstein files, right? But Trump consistently avoids real transparency. Instead of confronting the issues head-on, responsibly, like a leader in a democracy should, he relies on suppression. Lawmakers keep chasing documents, footage, and financial records, but the Department of Justice under Trump repeatedly stalls, often tiptoeing around subpoenas, delaying, or claiming there's nothing in the files. Really? Every delay reinforces the impression that that information is being deliberately hidden, and that there's some information in it that they don't want us to see. Meanwhile, investigations really do show that Epstein's network operated on a massive international scale, involving millions of dollars, prominent financial institutions, and human trafficking to human beings that crossed borders. There are victims and there are perpetrators. There is that list somewhere. Trump's past associations with Epstein remain public, increasingly being uncomfortable and damaging to him, no matter how much he tries to run away from it. The fear surrounding Epstein isn't just personal for him, it's political. The references to Project 2025, the rapid consolidation of executive power, and Republican complicity in all this highlight how Trump exploits fear around him to push his agenda. He leverages secrecy and intimidation to reshape government around his ego like a mob boss. Withholding $2 billion in Chicago and $18 billion in New York simply to block programs he labels Democrat. Even though they are already funded, he's blocking it, and this demonstrates this reckless, self-serving style of governance. This is real public infrastructure, education, and services that are supposed to be going to people in those cities, not under his command, and they all suffer while he prioritizes personal and political goals. And even within his own party, the level of compliance is striking. Republican lawmakers either just follow his lead without protest or avoid challenging him while he advances policies that hurt the public more than they can possibly help it. Millions of Americans, Republicans included, their own constituents, feel the consequences of stalled infrastructure, frozen funding, horrible healthcare services, and disrupted services everywhere. Things are shutting down. Trump's decisions are increasingly guided by fear and insecurity and perhaps dementia, while Epstein's shadow continues to loom over him. At its core, the Epstein connection reveals more than personal scandal. It exposes how fear drives decision-making at the very highest level, how Trump weaponizes secrecy and illicit influence, and how accountability fails when this kind of power is unchecked. Each delay in addressing this scandal amplifies the reality of what motivates him. Self-preservation at the expense of governance and the country, and especially Epstein's victims. Americans are left paying the price while Trump navigates a landscape defined by fear, secrecy, and unchecked ambition. His actions show the deep risks of allowing personal insecurities to shape national policy.